Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for what you're doing to get the word out there. Steve Stern, thank you for using your voice to just inform the American public, American people. I'm very grateful to you. You can hear the prison loudspeaker in the background. With all that's been done to me because of this criminal regime that you guys know all too well, it still confirms our resolve and our fight that we have to keep fighting. I have more resolve than before. I have complete confidence in our legal team. They've risen above what any legal team that I've ever seen has done. I mean, they've really not only been effective and efficient against these criminals, I guess I would call them, that have put me here. They both have practiced. Well, two of them have practiced more than have practiced for 50 years, and they said, Tina, we have never seen in our whole career this kind of lawlessness amongst the DAs, the attorney generals, all the way up, of course, and now even the attorney general in his responses to the DOJ's statement of interest basically are saying now what we've known all along is that Merrick Garland and the past Department of Justice have been involved since the very beginning of this. And why is that? Why would they be involved with a small town clerk and recorder, and bring the full force of a corrupt government down on one person like me? Well, it's because they want to silence your voice. They want to send a signal to every person that would ever speak out, ever be a whistleblower, speak out against the corruption of the elections, about the selected individuals that are in office, about their deeds. They want to use me as the sacrificial lamb. And, I've said before in my shows that there's more of us than there are of them. They can't get us all. And so I just want you to focus on that our fight is, we are winning the fight. We're bringing, you can tell from the information that's coming out now on Fox News and other many influencers that are on this call, actually, that are putting out the truth about and the Department of National Intelligence. Tulsi Gabbard just spoke about the machines and how they have proof now about the criminality of the vote switching and the software. And all of this was because one person, just like you, a nobody, just decided to stand up and not back down with the bullies. And I used to, my kids, when I was homeschooling them, and when they were in school, in grade school, I would just say the only way to beat a bully is to beat them up. I mean, and I'm not advocating violence in any way, shape, or form, but you cannot see evil and not do anything. And there's certain things that you can't unsee. But the state of Colorado had no right to prosecute me, no right to indict me, because I was immune from prosecution. I guess I had a duty, and this is something they would not let the jury see or hear, that I had a duty imposed by federal law to preserve election records, especially in a presidential or a federal election. And the judge would not allow the jury to hear this evidence, and that I had a federal duty to preserve and protect election records. I was the only one in Colorado and maybe in the United States that actually preserved the election records as far as the adjudication files and how the computer sees how a vote's cast, the audit log files. That's important to show how you get to the total of the election, and of course the access log files, where we know now, because there are 36 wireless devices in the Mesa County server, that the election management system, that could be accessed from any cell phone, any computer around the world. And we know that this extends to Serbia, Slovenia there, it's to Venezuela, to, all around the world. This is not just a Colorado thing. It's not just a United States thing. This is a global, and that's why they've had to come down so hard on me, putting me in prison for 9 years. But I want to let you know that God keeps me, and all the prayers by all of you out there and the support. You can always reach out to me at tinapeters.us. There's the America Project that I appreciate any legal funds that you want to contribute there, and that is a link on my website as well. I'm very grateful to people like Patrick Byrne and, of course, I said our legal team and the America Project for all they've done. So if you want to support me at tinapeters.us, my personal, because I'm incarcerated, I no longer get my Social Security, which was helping to pay my mortgage. And so you can help me at the Give, Send, Go on my website, or if you want to donate to the legal fund to the America Project, and all of that at tinapeters.us. Please pass the movie around, put everything out on social media, draw attention to the criminality that we found in Mesa County Reports 1, 2, and 3 that have exposed what they're doing to. This is not about Democrats or Republicans. This is about people's right by the Constitution to have to vote, and also to have their vote counted as they cast it. And so when someone tries to say, well, she was an election denier, wanted to disprove the 2020 election, well, that's not how this started. This started from a municipal election that I said, this is no way this can be. And then from there, it of course, exposed that election as well as the 2020 election. And this has been going on for a long time. Thank you so much for Steve for allowing me to be on here, and all the people that are representing the great American patriots all across the United States. I love you. Please pray for me. Prison is never a place I want anyone in this listening audience to go. It's a very bad place to be, but I consider it my duty and my privilege to do this right now on behalf of the American people, and pray that the justice will prevail and I will be out soon. But I love you guys. Thank you again for doing this on behalf of me, on behalf of the American people, on behalf of getting the truth out. And as you know, the truth does matter. Thank you. God bless you guys. Thank you so much.
That was Tina Peters, and a call for you, Steve Stern, our guest. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing terrific, and we're going to talk today about precinct strategy, election integrity, and how we got to this video that you just watched. And it's so important because a lot of people, 9 out of 10 people in the United States, have no clue who Tina Peters is. And how did I get involved in all this? And we're going to show you. So in the back of my shoulder is a picture of President Trump and myself in one of my meetings in 2020, 2 days before the election. And that started this whole ball rolling. And how did it start? So we started with precinctstrategy.com, and that's President Trump endorsed that. And what is precinctstrategy.com? That's Dan Schultz and Steve Bannon, who got together and got people involved in the Republican Party, and we're still doing that today. So about 4 years ago, I saw Dan Schultz on Steve Bannon's program, and I called Dan up and said, hey, I'm involved in the Broward Republican Executive Committee, and this day I am actually the vice chair now of the Broward Republican Executive Committee. So I said, we have a lot of things happening in Broward, and we have a lot of success stories. When he listened to me and he said, let me talk to Steve Bannon's guy and see if we can't get you on. Well, about 2 weeks later, I got on, and that started the ball rolling on all this stuff. And it's a funny story because, when you first get on TV or when you do your podcast, the first podcast or the first time in TV, a little nervous. You want to get it all going good. So they told me I'd be on at 10:15. And it could be 1 million people watching. Well, that's a little nerve-wracking. So I got up at 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm making notes. I wanted to, make sure I knew what I was doing. And 10:15 comes on. They Skype me, and I get on and I listen to what they're saying in the background. It was a commercial, and they said the producer said you'll probably come on about 10:30. Well, I won't go through the whole story, but about 11:45, after losing about 5 pounds of sweat and forgetting everything I was going to say, I got on because at 11:46 the program's almost over. So anyway, I made my statement 10 minutes, and I didn't remember what I said, but about 2 days later they sent me a copy of the Zoom, and they said you did a great job, and I listened to it, and I got on numerous times. I've been on about 100 times on Steve Bannon. So let's get back to the picture behind this. This was 2 days before the election, and how I got up there was, and another funny thing happened about 2 weeks before that. I had the appointment with President Trump, and they canceled it. So I figured, well, I wouldn't get to see him, but they redid it on this day. And on that day, two things were happening. One, I was seeing him at around 4:30, got there around 3:30, and the Secret Service went through all the questions and, made sure I didn't have anything on me. They wouldn't let me take my phone in or anything like that, but they carried the phone in for me. And we had about 7 of his secretaries. Liz Harrington, who was involved with getting him to endorse Precinct Strategy, was there. She flew in. And we spent about 45 minutes, and a lot of stuff happened during that. But the main reason I went up there was to ask him to talk about, on his rallies, to getting people involved. So that was my main purpose. And a lot of strange things happened on it because this was 2 days before the election. So he was talking to me, and he was also being on the phone at the same time, talking about different candidates he was endorsing with his pollster. And I said to him, Mr. President, I got 2 guys, one in Vermont, one in New Hampshire. Would you endorse them? He said, well, let me find out about him. And he called his pollster. And of course, they were like 5 points behind, but he did endorse them, which was unbelievable because who am I? I'm just an average guy like you. We get on, we do our program, we do our stuff. And that was very nice of him endorsing him. So during this discussion, he said to me, I endorsed your precinct strategy, and I will talk about this at my rallies when I start to do them, and as I run for president again. And he did do that. And he said to me, look, you do an precinct strategy Zoom every week. I said, yes, Mr. President, I did that. It's actually every 2 weeks. And he said, well, look, why don't you put in the election security thing among that? Because he said to me, what do you think about the 2024 election? I said, well, look, the same thing has happened before in the 2020. Nothing has really changed. And, we talked a little bit at it. And I said, look, let me see what I can do because I'm an expert on election integrity. So about 3-4 weeks later, I started calling people and asking who the people are who are the experts.
Yeah.
And we got about.
When is this? When is this? By the way, the date of this is happening.
Well, this was the first event started about 5 weeks after the 2020 election, so we're way back there, and that's when we started our election security call, and that happened, and we had about 200 to 500 people on. And the thing that happened that made it different was about 8 months ago, Steve Bannon had me on in the morning. And what I did, normally I hold up a sign because I'm old school and everything. Are a lot of the older people on there. So I would put this up as Stern1022 or Gmail. And anybody listening, you want to jot this down, and we'll put it up a couple of times because this is going to be very important to you. So he put my email on the bottom of the screen, or his producer did. And we had 1,000 people sign up for the election security call of that day. And that was about 8 months ago. And then he said something that changed this whole election security call. He said, Steve, I'm going to put this up on my Getter account and on my War Room account. Well, as an 83-year-old guy, and I'm 83, going to be 84 here next month. And we had 34,000 people on it. The next day, Maureen Bannon called me, said, "Hey, we had 34,000 people on it. That's great." And I said, "Well, you know something? I just learned something." I said, "Well, I never thought about having it live all over the place." So I started calling podcasters like yourself and other people to put it on live. So we're going to talk about our Thursday call last week is when we played our video. So last week on Thursday, we had 8 million people on it. Well, a lot of people say to Steve, "Hey, how did you get 8 million people?" Because you got to verify what you're doing. Well, I'm going to tell you that we had more than 8 million, but I can only verify 8 million. So where did we have this? We had this on Getter. We had this on Patriot TV, Twitter, Rumble, Facebook, Cloud Hub, Lindell TV, Stern American. So let's go back to Stern American. I'll tell you about the other people. Stern American is my channel. And if you go to Stern American and scroll down to Stern American Rumble, all the past election security calls are on there. And why is that important? We're going to talk about that, but let's go back over the one we had and how we had all these people on. So we had 184 podcasters streaming this, and then we had OBBM Network on. If you go to OBBM Network and hit it, on the front page, you will see a picture of Tina Peters. And if you hit that, you will see all the people that did videos. We had about 50 people that did videos that aren't all up there yet. I think about 35 are on it. So people started doing a video for her, and I led the charge with a 1-minute video. Some people did too. You will see all the people. And what this whole election security call was for you to call the governor, and I'm going to put that up. I don't know if they can see that, but the governor's
Governor
number.
Jared Polis of
There you go.
Colorado. His number is 303. This is for people who can't see. 303-866-2471. That's 303-866-2471. Call him right now. Operators are standing by to hear you tell this governor, Jared Polis of Colorado, to let Tina Peters go. They put her in prison. We're going to get into the backstory of that, but this is a political prisoner. And Steve, you're on the show, the #1 show for getting people clemency at the federal level. Every person that we had call in Trump's first term, who would call in for federal prison for nonviolent offenses, they had life sentences. They would call in and get their 15-minute phone call on our show before the prison system would automatically hang up on them. And almost every one of those people has now had clemency from Trump, or they were released under the First Step Act. So we're the only show. A lot of the conservative media didn't want to do a lot of stuff with criminal justice reform because they wanted to look like tough guys. Oh, we're tough. We throw everybody away. But that comes back to bite you when you start realizing that when you start having that lock 'em up mentality. Well, if you don't have any principles behind that lock 'em up, then everybody gets locked up who's not in power. So that's what's happening, and it's coming back to haunt some of the folks that were a little bit too gingerly and throwing everybody in a cage for a nonviolent offense. And obviously what Tina Peters did, she was an election official, right? And she saw some funny business. And she didn't do anything violent. There's no victim on the police report for her. There's no victim. It's just a nonviolent, victimless, false accusation that was meant to bear down, a kind of statement to any citizen who dares to do the right thing in the face of dubious election practices. Am I right?
100%. And she got 9 years, and they won't even allow her out on appeal.
And how old is she? She's not.
She's 70 years old.
Yeah,
She's
geez.
an all-star mom. She lost everything. So what we did on this particular event, we had over 10,000 people call. That's an estimate naturally, but as we were on the call for 2.5 hours, people would call, and then naturally you only can leave a message, but sometimes people answer. And what happened was people would post their calls saying, that they called, and we started getting them from all over the world, actually. And what we're going to do for the next month, we want 1 million people to call. Now, who was involved in this, and how did this all happen, and what's going on? So you get the background. So what we had was we had a little Mark Cook got together people in Colorado, and for 15 minutes we had them talk about this. And on the next one, we're going to do a 30-minute town hall, which is going to be on May the 14th. So that's why you need my email. I'm going to tell you how to get on and where you can find it, because it's so important. If you get a voice, and where we had the 8 million people on, we had the voice, and we started slowly with 50,000 and 100,000 and 1 million and 2 million, and kept growing because more and more people came on. So Mark Cook is in Colorado and is one of the top guys that are helping Tina Peters. I also had 100,000 emails sent out. That's how we get a lot of people on. And I called everybody in Colorado who is a chairman, vice chair, or person who was a chairman before, because they don't even have the updated thing on it. And we had a lot of people talking. Now, unfortunately, Colorado has a lot of rhinos and establishment people, so we have to decipher who's a MAGA person, because that's who the people are getting involved. So Mark Cook, along with other people I'll tell you about 2 months ago, had an 8-hour program for Tina, which is listed, and we'll get it out to everybody if they email me. Then we had Mike Lindell on. Mike Lindell has supported her and paid for a lot of her legal events. And he was up with President Trump here about, I guess it was about a month ago, or maybe a little bit longer. And as he was sitting with President Trump, he turned and he said, "Tina Peters." President Trump turned to his 4 attorneys on the right and said, "Get her to you-know-what out of jail." So the Justice Department has put in a statement to have him explain why they did this to Tina Peters and why they made it a state case rather than a federal case, because it was a federal election. And therefore, President Trump could exonerate her and give her a pardon. So they were smart.
Maybe can Trump withhold Colorado federal funds until they stop putting people in political prison?
Well, one of the things in Colorado is the most
he's doing it. He's doing it for Maine with the transgender kids, right? I mean, the gender athletes. Remember?
Yeah. So first he got the his department to bring a case against them and show about, because the Secretary of State did a lot of the same stuff, and many of the same people did the same stuff as Tina did, and nothing happened to him, because she's one of the few Republicans in a blue state which can do whatever they want, because, and that's one of the problems. So Mike is going to see, he came on, he talked about all the fraud that was going on, and we have a lot of people that were working on the front end. And I have to tell you, and I want to interject this because it's very important. The first thing I want to tell you is that on my 81st birthday, I got a beautiful letter, and I want to show you this and I want to read it because it's very important, so people understand that we are talking to President Trump and many of his people. So here's a little envelope, and in the back of the envelope, I don't know if you can see, there's a little tear on there. So when I got home from my 81st birthday on May 20th, which is going to be my 84th birthday, my wife got the envelope and she ripped the envelope. And, God comes down and does certain things. Well, when I pulled it out, it wasn't ripped, which was, I don't know how that happened. And I want to read the nice letter I got for President Trump on my 81st birthday. You can see this because very important. You have to have integrity. And this gives you integrity, and it also tells you why I'm working. So it says, "Dear Steve, we join your family and friends in wishing you a happy 81st birthday. Our nation is strong because of hardworking patriots like you who believe in and defend the great American ideals of faith, family, community, and country first. Your commitment to excellence and dedication to exemplify the American dream through ingenuity, hard work, and principled leadership is the foundation of your tremendous success and demonstrates the proud spirit of family-owned and operated business. As you celebrate this special day, we hope your heart is filled with joy, knowing you have experienced our country's greatest blessings, freedom, and the affection of your loved ones. Melania and I have sent our very best wishes for your continued health, happiness, and success. Happy birthday, and may God bless you and your family. Sincerely, Donald Trump." Now, I sent him back a letter and also a birthday card for his birthday, June 14th, because June 14th is Flag Day, and as we are a patriotic website, we're the largest in the world, www.theflagshirt.com. We'll talk a little bit about that later because it's very important, because we do a Flag Day event every Flag Day. And the Flag Day we did on my 81st birthday was to wish President Trump a happy birthday. We had 42 speakers, 9 hours on TV. So that's also up on our site. And if people want to get involved in that, we'll let them know how to do that also, which is June 14th. So you can see all this plays together. And back to our election security call, our main effort here even though we had election security people on, and we're going to talk about those, and we had our Tina Peters people on, who was Dr. Doug Frank, who was both involved in election integrity and was at the trial for Tina Peters. Dr. Frank goes all over the country, telling people how to get people off the voter rolls and teaching them what's going on, like we did. So when President Trump won the election, and why this is so important, and I'm going to talk about this. If you can see protectthevote.com, protectthevote.com is the RNC's site to get involved for poll watchers and poll workers. After President Trump won, about a week later, I started getting text emails for everything that we did. Now, I'm just an average guy. Believe me, I'm no different than you and anybody out there listening to. But I take action, and you can see by what we do, because there's not very many people that can get 8 million people on an election security call. Believe me, it takes 12 hours a day, every day to do this, including Saturday and Sunday. So we send 20 days to do this. And what happened was, about a week after, I got a text from Susie Wiles, his chief of staff, who wasn't the chief of staff before, saying, thank you for all you're doing. We got texts from many, many people, including General Flynn, Liddell, everybody who was on TV, when they started seeing what we did, because what we did was we brought all the people together to understand what they had to do on election security in their hometown. We cannot do this on a national basis. We have to do this on a grassroots level, which is what we do. Why precinct strategy is important, because the precinct strategy is the grassroots of every precinct in the United States. And that's how we get involved. So we did the same thing with election integrity. So getting back to and you could see how all this, evolves together. We had Greg Stenstrom on. Greg comes on almost every call because he is the head of bringing lawsuits in Pennsylvania, which is how we won the last election, because we took Pennsylvania. Because what the RNC did, even though I didn't agree with everything they did, because we had very little contact. I only got about 10 or 15% contact with them, and they gave me a gold star for getting them 40,000 poll watchers and poll workers, which were very important to win the election. So Greg has a book. He also has been on all our calls, and we've had major calls. I did a big one at Trump International in March, where we brought people in from all over the country. And we even had more than the 8 million people. We had 10 million people on, and we did this for 4 hours. And Greg has lawsuits all over Pennsylvania of all the fraud. But the most important one, he has one at the Supreme Court showing 3.5 hours of videos and also paperwork of all the fraud that happens. Now, there's fraud everywhere. And, thank God, even though I'm in Florida and you're in Florida, we do have fraud in Florida. And thank God, just recently in St. Petersburg, Pinellas, where we have a lot of fraud. And I can tell you that 189,000 ballots were sent in one of the elections that nobody asked for. So they were mail-in ballots that they sent out. Just recently, a couple of days ago, the Justice Department had a guy brought up where he registered 100 illegal votes. And that's what we got to get. We have to get the Justice Department to start to arrest people in all these states, because we have a girl who comes on every Zoom, Linda Sinkowitz, fightvoterfraud.org. You see how all these important things are and how you can get involved. She has and will give everybody who's listening here 500 people, up to 500 people who voted twice in your precinct. Now think about that. How many people have voted twice in many of these areas? And she has proof of that. And they're starting to come up to the Justice Department. The FBI are starting to arrest people that have voted twice. And it's just started in one of the states. And people say, well, how could that happen? Very easy. Let's say you own a home in New York, where this happens a lot, and you own a home in anywhere in New Hampshire, Vermont, or any of these places. They don't know that you registered in New York and that you registered in New Hampshire unless we can get the proof out there. Because let's face it, you own a home in New York, your home in New Hampshire, so you go to New Hampshire, you register, and you vote. But you've also voted in New York. That's just some of the areas that happen. And there's fraud all over. So on the 2024 election, it was great that President Trump won. But because the RNC didn't work closely with us, the down ballot elections, we lost a lot of votes. And I'm announcing today on your show, and we had Joe Hoft on, who just came out today showing that the Justice Department is going after Orange County, California, which I go actually every year for vacation. My son played tennis for Cal Irvine, but they are showing how the election was stolen for Congress in Orange County, California. And you ask how that happened. Very simple. On election day, five people were running for Congress that were winning the election. And the ballots came in a week later. They took ballots in, and then they were up about let's say 5,000 ballots. A week after that, more ballots come in. Think of this. All these ballots coming in a week, 2 weeks after, and they were tied. Now, a week later, all of a sudden, another 50, 60,000 ballots they found, and they now were down by 10,000, 20,000 ballots. So they're going to show how these ballots were fraudulent, because there's no way that you can bring in ballots after the election, 3 weeks after the election. So the Justice Department is going to examine it. And if we could prove that these happened, and we could turn the Congress there, if not this time, the next election, because the next election is even going to be more important in 2026. Because, already they're starting to say, hey, we're going to impeach President Trump for getting the J6s out, which you had a lot of influence on in getting them out. And it's so important. So you see how all these things are tied in. And then we had Catherine Engelbrecht on. Catherine Engelbrecht was on our election security call, True to Vote. She was also put in jail. And she tells you about how this happened. And you could see when Tina Peters came on and did her video. And hopefully everybody watches it and gets sent out. But she has hundreds of thousands of people that came on. And also Kimberly Fletcher is on, Moms for America. She's going to help us. They have 500,000 women that are going to start to help. And it's important that if you know any women's group, because let's face it, the women got to get Tina Peters out of jail. And they have gone in for the school boards all over the country and have spoken up, because we see how the schools are, teaching people. I've got two granddaughters who went to Northwestern University, and they tell me how left-leaning Northwestern, well, it's every school. You see, most of these colleges have woke, Democratic, far-left people teaching school.
Yeah.
And thank God that the young people woke up, because President Trump won more young people votes. I hear you're going to ask a question, so go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying, you've got more energy at your age than David Hogg does. So I think we're in good hands with your ideas here. You've got
Well,
David Hogg is their new star for how they're going to remake the Democrat Party.
Yes, I saw that.
Even more left wing than it already is. And he just did an interview with James Carville, who looks more and more like E.T. from the movie, and he was screaming and yelling at David Hogg for doing primary challenges for Democrats. But you've got more energy and more high energy charisma than these little guys over there on the other side. So I think that's a good fight right there.
Well, we got, the good thing that's happening is, look, I'm 83, going to be 84. You can only do this so many years. Now, I've been in business since I'm 12 years old, 71 years. And I got to tell you, I gave most of the business to my son so I could do this. I do sometimes 10, 15 programs a week. I've been on 184 programs, along with Steve Gruber, many, and of course, my good friend, Stephen Bannon, who has really made me. And, when I ask him to come on, a lot of times he'll get me on. And that's so important, because he's our voice. He's MAGA, and it's so important. A lot of people say, hey, Steve, how do you get this energy? You got to be born with it. You just don't develop that. When I was 12 years old, I was already coming down. My dad had a wholesale business. I was coming down after junior high school, and they started when I was 12. And, when I was 18 years old, a lot of people asked me, well, what did you do? Well, I'm involved in the apparel business. You can see the website behind me of theflagshirt.com. And we asked people to, of course, to buy shirts. And I really gave most of the business to my son. But I developed a shirt when I was 18 years old called bandedbottom.com. My son doesn't like me to promote it because it's a more mature shirt. But I sold JCPenney 14 million a year for 44 years. And I made a mature men's development of that shirt. And how I did it by what I do all the time is call. I'm on the phone constantly talking to people, because today, if you text and you email, they don't even respond because
That's
so
right.
many people get up. But you have to call people, and I called you, and that's the way you do it.
That's
And
right.
people don't respond.
You're a relentless guy. I mean, there's not a lot of people with your level of determination in any political movement in America. I mean, you really outshine them all because you don't stop. You know, you keep going. So that's a lot of people don't have that determination. They give up. Like he said, they put an email in, and I have to tell you, that's how I've had success too. Is just, it wasn't always a call. Sometimes it's an email, but a lot of these people, they say, "Oh, you can't get a hold of them. You just do it, and you'd be surprised they'll show up." But
Well,
you have
that's
to
how
have,
I got to see President Trump and got to Mike Lindell. I called Mike Lindell cold. He actually answered the phone. The first thing I told him is, "Hey, I love your towels." So he started listening because I'm a businessman
yeah,
and I understand everything's going on. People ask me, "Are you happy with the tariffs?" Well, I have to. I love President Trump, but I'm very worried about China because we could put 100,000 businesses out of business. So we
yeah,
have to develop all this stuff. And one of the things that has happened, and we're
right,
trying to break this, is that the Trump campaign, the Trump team, have closed off everything that's going on. You cannot get through to them. You call the White House, you leave messages. I called all the secretaries. They have closed this off. I know people that know him, of course, like General Flynn, who helps me, and many people, Mike Lindell, go up there. But when Mike goes up there, is he going to talk about getting Steve Stern? The last time he was on, and you'll listen on this Zoom meeting, I said, "Look, I've been up to President Trump's office a number of times. I've seen President Trump many times. Back here is another event that I was at. You could see that. And that's where President Trump started to listen about precinct strategy because he told me at this event, if I knew about precinct strategy, would have won the last election.
yeah,
So it's important. So when people block you, and my intention is to get somebody up in the administration to understand election integrity and have our people get involved with them because when we did our election integrity I have 100 people that are experts. Cleta Mitchell, Jovan Pulitzer, Greg Stenstrom, Linda Sinkowitz. All these people are experts. They know what's going on. They're spending their money to make sure that this country doesn't have fraud.
yeah.
So if we can't connect with them, it's going to be difficult
Now, isn't
because
it? Isn't it? Didn't Trump say recently he wanted to do a paper ballot federal law? Is that something you can do constitutionally, or is
yeah,
that?
I mean, all the yeah,
I,
all the,
I'm a big fan of the Constitution, and I've read it many times. But I have to confess, I don't recall right now what it says specifically about elections. Does it say that that's the state's power or the federal? And if
Well, if it's
Trump,
a federal election, here's the way it goes. If it's a federal election, you can do these things and you have Congress pass it. If it's a state election, the state really has the power. But what I'm going to tell everybody is you have people that are listening that want to get involved. And if they
yeah,
go to Start American, you can see all these things and hear all these things because we need the people that are listening to all these podcasts, which have changed because people got off our younger people and our middle-aged people got off Fox and Newsmax and all these channels. Not that they don't watch all the time, but they're listening to podcasts today.
yeah,
That's where we give them the truth. And Kimberly Fletcher and Catherine Engelbrecht, who never get on, talk about all this type of things. Then I, had a couple of. What I do each time is I try to bring a podcaster like you on, and I'm a two-way guy. Every time I speak to one of my podcasts, I said, "Hey, if you want any of these people on, please call me and I'll give you the names. I give them,
we're
you
trying
know,
to. And I told you this. I told you this before, but we're trying to. We've got a project called the Manhattan Project for Cancer, and we want to solve cancer while we have our shot to do it with Kennedy in power. But we have to have a groundswell of popular support because the thing is there are researchers who are curing cancer with vitamin B1, B3, B7, and aspirin. This is astounding. You talk about what chemo, radiation, and surgery do to so many of our loved ones and how devastating it is on the body, how it ages you, how it destroys it sometimes kills you many times. But when you're talking about vitamin B1, you don't get killed from B1, you don't get killed from B3, you don't get killed from B7, you don't get killed from aspirin. And they're killing these tumor cells, the most lethal forms in the lab with this little cocktail. My friend Georgie Dinkoff is doing this. Another friend of mine, Michael Lasanti, who's a professor, he's an American patriot. He is using doxycycline, which is just a dollar antibiotic, to wipe out breast cancer. Now, imagine if we got a full court press with your power. You are one of the best networkers and motivators I've ever seen. With your power, you could take out cancer. I think if we put these investigators, these scientific researchers, they don't have the big money behind them because they're not coming up with some $100,000 a pop drug. They're coming up with B1. That's 5 cents, aspirin. But if we get this groundswell of support on shows like yours and Steve Bannon's and all the other ones you've mentioned, then the Kennedy will have the popular support to help push this through, get the research done, the attention done. And when we start curing cancer without chemo, surgery, or radiation, with vitamins and aspirin and doxycycline, there's going to be an explosion of hope in this country. There's going to be an explosion of wealth and savings. And these are going to motivate people to make sure that we carry on the legacy of what you're doing with the election integrity, too. So I'm just throwing that out there. We could talk about it further off, Joe, but I think
Sure.
You're the man that can really get things done better than anybody I've seen in conservative activism. So,
Well, one of them, because we have guys like yournews.com. I don't know if you know Sam Anthony, but you got to know him because yournews.com and totalnews.com, my two friends, they put out stuff to everybody. So these articles, they have millions of people that listen, and they're the future of news. So if you go to yournews.com, your program can be on there. He has everybody's program on there. And he also is going to go public. He is in Florida, and my other friend, Norman, totalnews.com, is in San Diego. So, and also Arizona. So you could see how all these things are important. And by coming on these shows, we let all these people know. Now, I would ask anybody who's listening to please go to Stern American and sign up on Twitter.
Is that .com, sternamerican.com?
Yes. And what you said about cancer, I just want to let you know a little inside story. Israel has a lot of things that they're doing that are going to come out here in the next couple of months on cancer. And also, robots are going to do a lot of stuff on cancer too, now, and AI, because all this information is getting out. So yes, they got to come on your show. They got to come on my show. And as we get my friends who talk to me and respond, I bring them on your show and on many shows that respond. The people that don't respond will eventually understand that even though they love themselves, and I got to tell you, DC Drano, who I asked to help us because Bannon told me to ask him, he tells me, oh, I want $2,000 a tweet. Now think about this.
Uh-oh.
Here's a guy that's got millions of people that are on his X, and he's asking me for $2,000 a tweet, although he gave me a few free. How do we save this country when people like that who have a voice, you know what I'm saying? So we got to get the people who have a voice, who have millions of people, and that's what we're working on. But
can you imagine if Thomas Jefferson said, I'm going to need $2,000 a word for the Declaration of Independence? Goodness.
So we have to get, now I go on a show if you got 10 people on, because I look how many everybody has. I don't care.
Yeah.
Because what I learned from Steve Bannon, he had one of the people on that said, from Europe, that said, I go in front of one person or 1 million people. It doesn't matter, because that one person could help me more than that 1 million people. So we have a few minutes left because I've actually got a doc's appointment, and we'll give you a couple of chance for a couple of questions. Let's just review. Let everybody go to stern1034gmail.com. Don't forget our site, www.theflagshirt.com. We have Memorial Day coming up. We got Flag Day coming up, and we got 4th of July. Those are our big times. And one of the things I want to tell you, we have some special items. This is one of our big items, a little sock. You wouldn't think that's the big, but I'm going to go back here and show you something that I do on every show, because I never knew that this could be the biggest item that we have. And I put it on to show people. It's a cowboy hat. Wow. This is our biggest single item. And I had, and how did I find out? Because I look to see what everybody buys. Every morning I get up at 5 o'clock and I go through and I send an email thanking everybody for buying our product. Now you say, well, how do you stay in business? When I first started, when I got the flag shirt going prior to 9/11, I would call everybody and they would say, well, look, nobody ever calls anybody to thank them for an order. And I said, well, that's why I'm still in business after all these years. So give you a couple of questions that I got to run. And I want to say action, action, action. Thank you, Turning Point, Charlie Kirk, for getting all these young people involved. Thank you, Steve Bannon, for giving your life. And you went to jail also. And when you were in jail, I did a shirt. If you go to standforbannon.com, you can get a shirt saying Stand for Bannon. I did that for him when he went to jail. And I spent hours on TV talking about it because Steve Bannon in jail was talking to his daughter, giving us to help us for the 2024 election. And, he's took the 4 months instead of, saying, I'm going to come to Congress and testify, which is ridiculous. So people like that are national heroes. And Tina Peters, please call the governor. It takes 2 minutes.
Yeah, put that number up. Let's give that number out one more time.
Yeah, the number is 303-866-2471. That's 303-866-2471. You can email the governor, Governor Polis, at state.co.us. And thanks very much for having me on today. Unfortunately, I run because I have a doctor's appointment, but it's been a pleasure being here.
Yeah, it's great having you on too. So I'm glad to have you, and let's do it again sometime. Thanks for your work.
You got it. Well, it's a great honor to be on your show. And I'm a veteran also, so I've been through that also. And during the Vietnam War, I was in the reserves, but in the medical unit. And we love to get our veterans involved.
You'll like this piece I've got coming out this week in the AmericanConservative.com. It's about how, with the Vietnam anniversary, we've done so much more with peace than we ever did with war with Vietnam. Because look at how much Vietnam was the first country to come to us to want to do a negotiation for trade. And we accomplished more with peace and trade and dialogue than we ever did with bombing them into.
Well, you know why they go to war, to get all these people to manufacture and put people to work. They don't really want to go to war. They need, and the same thing that's going on now, all this money. And what you said about the cancer, people are more interested in making money, the big, people that farmer. And, look what all we'd save if we didn't have to do this chemo. All our Medicare, because mostly the Medicare goes to, for the chemo, and that's hugely expensive. I think of what is it, around 15,000 every time somebody does chemo. It's ridiculous. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So thank you for all you're doing.
What you're doing.
Yep, you too.
SternAmerican.com. Everybody check it out. Thank you.